60 is a massive milestone, not just for your life, but for your finances too. That's when some of the biggest superannuation tax benefits kick in. In fact, it might be the most tax-friendly point of your whole life, but only if you know how to take advantage of it. In this video, we'll break down exactly what changes at 60, how you can make the most of it, and the traps you need to avoid. So what changes when you turn 60? Most important of all, you can now get access to your superannuation assets. And this is usually the second largest asset outside of our home, particularly for self-funded retirees. Now, 60 is what's known as a partial condition of release, meaning at this point, you could commence, at the very least, a transition to retirement pension and start getting access to your superannuation. In that case, it would only allow you to access up to 10% of your balance per year. But if you stop working after turning 60, even if you have multiple jobs and just stop working in one of them, your entire super fund becomes available and accessible to you. This is known as turning your balance into unrestricted, non-preserved. And this is only the beginning. Once you turn 60, every dollar you take out of your superannuation account is also tax-free in the vast majority of examples. What I'm referring to there is a defined benefit, and some untaxed superannuation funds, particularly in the public service, can have small taxable. But the vast majority of people, everything becomes tax-free. Both taxable and tax-free components, which you'll see on your superannuation statement, are received tax-free as superannuant retired or not retired after turning 60. And that doesn't matter whether you're drawing a pension or you're drawing it as a lump sum out of your superannuation account. And this is why it makes your transition to retirement strategy so much more tax effective. Think about it. You could draw tax-free income of up to 10% of your balance while you're continuing to work and reduce your hours at the same time, reducing your taxable income, but replacing it with non-taxable income and be in a net better position, but with less tax going out the window, working less, and still having the same after-tax position that you had before, or even better. But by far, one of the biggest changes of all that comes when you're 60 is what I call the big switch. That is the switch between saving phase and income phase, and what the industry calls a switch between accumulation and pension, those more complicated approaches to explaining it. Now, despite beliefs of the opposite, superannuation is taxed while you're saving. That is, it's taxed at a significantly better rate than the alternatives, like your marginal tax rate. As we know, the base tax rate on marginal tax is 16%. So the tax rate for superannuation is 15% on the income and capital gains at your superannuation fund, regardless of whether you're an SMSF, an industry fund, in a platform. The 15% tax rate applies on income and capital gains. Now, for assets held for more than 12 months, the gain is reduced by 33%, making it an effective tax rate of 10%. And this applies regardless, but there is some complexity when it comes to an industry super fund, because these are pooled trusts and they pay tax within those trusts, as opposed to an SMSF or a platform where the tax is paid on the individual investments and the decisions you make. Hence the value of control of those assets and the timing of those tax events. This is also the tax, interestingly, on deductible contributions to superannuation. So your concessional contributions that are capped at $30,000 per year are taxed at 15% as assessable income of the fund. And that's why you see the amount that's actually allocated to your account reduced by 15%. So let's say you have $100,000 in earnings as a self-funded retiree within your superannuation fund, say an SMSF or a platform like Colonial First State or Hub24. Your tax rate on this would be $15,000 in the first year, give or take some franking credits that might reduce it. But if you've turned 60, stopped working and started a pension, your entire world changes. Your tax rate actually shifts to 0%. So that means that $15,000 in tax you're paying is now yours. And you may also be entitled to a refund of any franking credits you've received from the investments that you hold. And this is one of the massive benefits to a self-funded retirement. Unfortunately, in my experience, too many retirees, particularly those that aren't receiving financial advice, simply forget that they should commence a pension when they can, whether it's a short-term job loss, whether that's turning 65, or whether it's just a reduction in the amount of jobs that you have at any given point in time. This leads me to the next point, which is known as the transfer balance cap. This is not to be confused with the total super balance cap, which is the same level, that being $2 million from 1 July 2025. It has increased slightly from $1.9 million, but this started back in 2017 as a $1.6 million cap. What it means is that you can have no more than $2 million in your pension or income account within your superannuation fund and receive that tax exemption on the earnings that you're generating and the capital gains that you're generating within that fund. Interestingly and more complicated, and this is why it's always good to go on MyGov and check your superannuation balance there, is that if you've commenced a pension in prior years, you may have a lower cap than the full 2 million, and there are individual indexing that can occur to your cap. So it's important to go check that on your MyGov account before commencing a pension and making sure you're getting the best use of that tax exemption that comes on the earnings within your superannuation assets. So how much of your earnings are excluded from tax calculations in superannuation? And you can have both a pension and a non-pension account in the same fund, particularly if you're in an SMSF, or you'll have to have separate accounts if you're in an industry fund or a platform in most cases. Now, the total super balance cap, which I referred to at the beginning, also determines if you can make further non-concessional contributions to superannuation, but it doesn't restrict you from making concessional contributions. So your balance needs to be below $2 million if you're going to make further non-concessional contributions. So what are the strategies you should think about once you turn 60? The first one is you need to think about starting that pension or income stream. Do you have enough money to stop work? It could be a full pension. Do you want to reduce work? It could be a transition to retirement pension. Now, the TTR doesn't have the same tax benefit of a full pension, where you get that tax exemption on the assets that are supporting the payment of that pension. However, even if you can't improve your tax position, it can still be beneficial to reduce the amount of income tax you're paying personally. Even though it doesn't come with that exemption on the earnings within your fund, you can still end up being better off. You need to look at your balances as a couple when you turn 60. You should team up to maximize your transfer balance caps as much as possible. And another question we have is, can you withdraw from one account and contribute to the other? Now is the time to start thinking about equalizing your superannuation balance, particularly if you want to self-fund a retirement. And again, we referred to this earlier, which is if you work multiple jobs, you can actually stop work in one of those jobs and access to super according to the ATO and legislation. Insurance is also something that needs to be considered at this stage. It gets incredibly expensive once you get to 60 years of age, and a lot of us don't quite get that we only get coverage for 12 months at a time. You need to review your insurance, particularly inside super, at least every 12 months, if not more regularly. And the big question you should be asking is, do you have debt? Do you have enough to retire? And now that you can access your superannuation, do you actually need much more insurance anymore? Well, obviously, always talk to a financial advisor or an insurance advisor about this. And let's not forget about the downsizer contribution. If you're doing a tree change or a green change, or the kids have finally moved out, you're eligible to make the downsizer contribution at 60 and before. This allows you to get an extra $300,000 per person as a once-off into superannuation, regardless of your total super balance and regardless of your transfer balance cap. And that's the key. It is outside of those caps. What are some of the mistakes that you need to avoid? I've seen clients get their retirement off on the wrong foot so many times. One of the biggest mistakes is I see people withdrawing way too much, way too soon. They hit those golden years and they spend up a significant amount. And this is where sequencing risk comes in. So if you're drawing a significant amount of money from your portfolio and the market falls right at the beginning of your retirement, just as you're drawing a lot, it can have a long-term impact. Your capital could be severely depleted for an extended period of time because you're not giving it the opportunity to invest and compound and consolidate. So what you need to do is assess a sustainable drawdown level and adjust your spending or your investments accordingly. So many people also tend to misunderstand the ability to access superannuation and commence a pension. The pension has massive benefits, and accessing a super doesn't necessarily if it's as a lump sum. People also tend to take too short-term a view in retirement when it comes to investments. Income may feel secure, getting a locked-in deposit rate, but it doesn't provide longevity of your capital. You need to focus on both income and growth to enjoy the retirement you want, and you need to build resilience from interest rate cuts or interest rate increases or inflation or market volatility. Investing for growth, as we've covered in previous videos, can significantly extend how long your capital lasts. But also, don't forget about policy risk. Will the contribution caps change? Will the tax rates change? You need to stay on top of this to ensure you don't get caught out. But you also don't need to react to rumors or headlines that come in the media at different points. So what's the big takeaway from this video? 60 is the most important milestone on the way to your self-funded retirement. It is the unlock point for your super, but it isn't automatic. You need to make some important steps at this time to get it right. You need to actively shift your strategy to take advantage of those tax benefits and avoid missing out. And this is something we do every single day for self-funded retirees at Waddle.